Hey friends, today I'd like to talk to you about the spiritual discipline of self-care. Now, you may not think of self-care as being a particularly holy thing, but I have a whiteboard today. I'm going to use that, and it's going to help us have this discussion. Is that all right? We good? Okay. You may have heard it said that everyone who goes to church, everyone who considers himself a Christ follower, a disciple, should have joy, right? Let's say Joy, and that's your area of concerns, that you should care about these three things: Jesus, others, yourself. There we go. And in that order. You might even have heard this before. Now, there's nothing implicitly or explicitly wrong about this, but one of the problems that happens here is in Christian circles, we can tend to focus on this and never get around to this. So that's why we're going to talk about the spiritual discipline of self-care. And I think in order to do this, I actually have to erase this and draw two stick figure people. Here we go. Let's do it right about here. There we go. Now, you might say one of the most important things for a Christian is to be like Jesus. Sure. And Jesus seemed very much concerned with decreasing the amount of suffering in the world. He went around healing people, went around announcing forgiveness to people, including the outsider, the ostracized. I mean, Jesus just seemed very much on like a pathological intent of making sure that he decreases the suffering in the world. So, you might come across someone who is. Let's do it like this. Oh my goodness. Here's a person who's completely suffering in some way. Could be physical, could be emotional, could be psychological, it could be anything. But the point is, they're suffering. And one of the most important things that we can do is love one another and help someone else overcome or just respond to their own suffering well. But what does this have to do with self-care? Well, it has to do with this. All of us have got our own ways in which we've suffered. Our own wounds, our own issues. Could be the way that we relate to ourselves internally. Could be the way that we maybe don't take care of our own physical selves. So we even have our own suffering in the world. But here's the deal. Unless you also work on decreasing the amount of suffering in your own life, that means you inevitably will be living out of your own sufferings and maybe even act towards other people out of your own hurts and your own wounds. And by doing that, you can actually increase someone else's sufferings because you don't know how to take care of yourself. So let's think about it. If you're acting in such a way or you're living in such a way that you're living out of past hurts, let's say you had a very troubled relationship with your parents. Unless you do a good amount of self-care and heal your own sufferings by getting help, you're actually going to increase the sufferings of people around you, because without knowing it, you're actually living out of your own wounds. Or let's say you need to take good vitamins. Unless you take good vitamins, you probably will not be living out of your best self. And then what can happen, you might be cranky with someone else. And by you, let's say not getting the sleep that you should, you could relate to someone else in a cranky way and increase someone else's suffering in the world. So what we are doing right here is just talking about how self-care actually is a spiritual discipline, because it's a spiritual thing to decrease the suffering in the world. not just in other people, but even within yourself. And sometimes we overlook that because we just kind of say in Christian circles, you should carry your cross, in some sense of saying, like, this is your suffering in the world, just deal with it, carry it. Well, there are some sufferings in the world in which you can get rid of by means of self-care. That means you get good amounts of sleep, you get proper nutrition. That means you maybe talk to a counselor if you need to. It means you realize you need to get out and maybe have some social interaction. I understand right now, maybe with just Zoom. But all this goes to say, self-care is a spiritual discipline because it's actually all about decreasing the suffering in the world, first in yourself, so that you can also help to decrease the suffering in other people. Because, we don't want suffering to be transmitted from one person to another. Hopefully, we live into doing this instead. Nothing but wholesome, compassionate, healing love. So that's it for this week. Consider for yourself the ways in which you actually may need to incorporate self-care as your own spiritual discipline. All right? So thank you. Be well. We'll catch you later.